Americans traditionally said kleptocracy is something that happens over there, right? It's in those other countries. We don't have kleptocracy in the United States. And what essentially it sounds like is essentially we have kind of justified it by saying, well, we're just selling services, right? What the people do with our services is not our concern. We're selling services, and who can object? We're bringing capital into our states. We're bringing real estate purchases. I mean, certainly you see this in South Florida. You see it in New York. With anonymous, as you said, these trusts that then buy real estate and other things. And then people say, well, what's the harm, right? Well, Americans are benefiting. American jobs are being created. Consultants are being hired. Media people get hired to improve the appearances of some of these figures, so on and so forth. So, to someone in the audience saying, okay, so they stole from someone in their country. Why is that a concern to me here?
Nick, I mean, that's a great, in many ways, the kind of $1 trillion question. I mean, in a certain sense, as I was writing the book, as I was certainly familiarizing myself with the policy developments and some of the stories and the broader incentive structure for why this system developed in the first place, in a certain sense, there's nothing surprising about it. Right? If we pull back to the 1980s, obviously there's a broader deregulatory ethos taking place that looks to create financial flows as easily as possible with as few questions as possible that are asked. And then obviously at the end of the day, dirty money, clean money, it's all just financing. It's all just money. And if it's going into constructs, if it's going into jobs creation, if it's going into local economies, well, who are we to look this kind of kleptocratic gift horse in the mouth? I mean, in the mouth, there's really nothing surprising about it at the end of the day, or that would be the smaller states that, again, have this overriding economic incentive because they don't have oil and gas extracts, they don't have broader manufacturing bases to really begin finalizing and formalizing these kinds of shell companies. I mean, what we've seen for years and years was exactly that. These questions of, we know this is happening. Maybe we don't have all the details. We don't have all the ideas of some of these figures and some of these specific networks. But at the end of the day, what does it matter to folks in South Florida? What does it matter to folks in New York or California or, for that matter, Sydney or for that matter, London? Obviously in 2016, we saw the Panama Papers finally burst forth and really begin revealing just how gargantuan this issue truly is. And some of the political figures and regimes that were connected to this, whether it's Putin in Moscow, whether it's the regime in Azerbaijan, those in Kazakhstan, those in Venezuela, those in countries like Equatorial Guinea, we finally beginning to have an idea of how these webs developed and where that money had been going. But even after that, certainly in the United States, there was kind of a shrug. Again, we know that these networks are developing. We know that this is happening. But what does it matter to the folks on the street? And it really wasn't until just last year when we had the Pandora Papers come out. And again, this is another release of significant details of these offshoring networks, but that finally drove home. And Satya, maybe this is where we can begin talking about how this really affects those in Main Street America. How it really revealed how the United States especially had made this transformation. And this was things like American lawyers setting up these shell companies, crafting pro-offshoring policies, how they were able to work with any clients that they want, move their money, hide their money, launder their money, really revealed some of the American services. And then beyond that, some of the American destinations and jurisdictions. Because right around the same time, there was a series of investigations that were coming out into a specific Ukrainian oligarch, a gentleman named Ihor Kolomoisky, who I write about in the book. Obviously, the book has far more details than right now. But what we know about that specific network, again, this is all just last year. This is all relatively recently. What we know about that network is that Kolomoisky, again, this Ukrainian oligarch, kind of this traditional typology. He's originally in steel and gas. He ended up running the country's biggest retail bank. And then beyond that, allegedly overseeing the country's biggest Ponzi scheme, $5.5 billion. What he ended up doing with it was moving that money not into Manhattan high-rises or the South Florida real estate landscape or, places in Southern California. He ended up going, of all places, to Cleveland, Ohio. He ended up plowing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, unaccounted for money, anonymous money, into small towns, steel towns, factory towns, manufacturing plants across the American Midwest, across the Rust Belt, across the American heartland. So again, to get back to your question, Nick, what does it matter to the folks on the ground? Well, what we have now begun seeing is that small town America, Main Street America, is now a target for all of this illicit wealth pouring in. But beyond that, it's not just that the money is coming in. What we now know from this one network, the Kolomoisky network, and again, there's only one network among many, many, many more that we have no idea about. What ended up happening is that that money didn't come in for investment. It didn't come in for job creation. Instead, it was part of this broader money laundering carousel where the money would come in on paper, but it would go out just as easily. No jobs are created. No revitalization comes. There is no investment. And what ended up happening is that those assets, those commercial real estate buildings, those steel plants, those manufacturing plants, ended up beginning to crumble, ended up sagging into effective oblivion. These are the economic crown jewels of so many different American regions, the steel plants, manufacturing plants, whose best days were behind them. They thought they were getting all this brand new revitalization coming in. It never happened. And now what we have seen since is jobs that have been lost, physical damage, not just to the plants themselves, but to the American steel workers and factory workers on the ground. That these economic crown jewels that just needed a little bit of reinvestment have effectively imploded. Those jobs are not coming back. Those facilities are not coming back. Again, this is blue collar, small town America. It's no longer just the major metropoles that have seen some of this money come in. Now we are only beginning to really see the kinds of physical costs, the kinds of devastation that is coming to small town. And again, this is right here in the United States that this is taking place, but this is also happening in Canada, in Australia, the United Kingdom, et cetera, et cetera.